What does it take to be named National Geographic's Adventurer of the Year? For Julie Angus, it took a death-defying trip across the ocean. Now she's written a book. Here's her story of an amazing journey that, in one sense, started in childhood.
When I was 11, my parents gave me a pet. It wasn't the dog I always wanted, but a fish, a guppy that swam between plastic fronds in its aquarium home. Glass separated us so that its watery world could exist in mine, and I used to imagine what it would be like if the situation were reversed and I existed in a fish's world. 2 decades later, in September 2005, my face was no longer pressed against aquarium glass. Instead, I watched an expanse of ocean unfurl before me. Somehow that just avalanched into a much larger adventure, which was going across the ocean.
That gets you to get it off over. I'd say earlier, but really it's just delaying the need. Actually gives you a much longer strength too.
I thought, a girlfriend would really be the best partner, because although Colin's a great adventurer and we get along very well, being in a small boat for that length of time puts an enormous strain on your relationship, and it's really not something that I wanted to put us through. So I decided I wanted to row the Atlantic, and then I had to find someone crazy enough to do it with me, and there comes Kathy.
Come back towards me a little, Julie.
So we're training right now with the Vancouver Rowing Club. Our coach is Alex. He's had not much to work with.
Why don't we add a little bit of pressure to it?
What really surprised me was when she told me that neither of them had ever rowed before. I was a little bit unsure of what was going to go on, but after a few days out on the water, they're taking to it really well.
When she told me she's going to row across the Atlantic, it was just an unbelievable sensation of fear. I spent time in the military, 20 years, and I had a lot of visual reference when I was in search and rescue, seeing body floating or cadavers in the water or something like that, or where people were victim of their own adventure.
His partnership had broken apart, so he was looking for an expedition partner to join him for a section of his expedition, which was crossing the Atlantic in a rowboat as well. A typical day is made up of rowing shifts. We each row for 2-hour shifts, and we would row anywhere from 16 to 24 hours a day.
So, Julie, it's day 2 now. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling pretty seasick, to be honest. It was great leaving Lisbon. It's a beautiful sight seeing the land slip away, but overwhelming feeling of nausea accompanies it. It's pretty busy waters out here. There are a lot of freighter ships.
They had a tanker coming very, very close to them, and they almost capsized them.
That was like a foot away from us! I opened the door and I looked inside and I saw that all I saw was the side of the freighter.
Obviously, a big tanker would not notice a little rowboat in the middle of the Atlantic, wouldn't even contemplate it.
There were a few moments that were quite terrifying throughout the journey. The scariest incident was when we were about 3 weeks into our row and the weather changed.
I was actually driving to work and I heard on the news that there was a hurricane building up in the southeastern corner of the Atlantic.
It was actually my birthday, my 31st birthday, and I called my dad to let him know that everything's fine, Dad, even though it wasn't.
My reaction was, basically, what are you doing? Did you know there's a hurricane in the neighborhood? And she said, hurricane? No, there's no hurricane here. I said, no, there is a hurricane. and you're probably 150 miles away from the eye.
Waiting for Vince to approach was the most frightening thing because we didn't know how bad the weather would get, whether our boat, which is made out of 1/4-inch plywood, would be able to endure those waves.
We've battened down the hatches, we've secured down loose gear, tied everything. The biggest danger if the boat does roll is getting slammed into the walls, and in order to getting broken bones or even head injuries. To protect our heads, we've actually fastened helmets, which we've made from pantyhose, and we've stuffed the interior with clothing. And so if we do end up banging our heads against the wall, it will actually protect us.
The space inside our cabin is tiny. Imagine the underneath of a kitchen table, and being cramped in there with another person is extremely uncomfortable for an hour, let alone 3.5 days. So the time that we were waiting through the hurricane, being tossed around inside our cabin, was extremely difficult. And there were other times where we were just sick of rowing, sick of not going anywhere. There were many days where we just were not making forward progress. You're really working hard, exerting a lot of energy, but you're not getting closer to the other side of the ocean.
Oh, good morning. There's a rambunctious turtle. He's battering his shell as something is banging the bottom of the boat as though he's trying to sink us.
I don't think you're born in an adventure at all. I mean, if you are, my route to it is certainly atypical. I wasn't very active in sports at all as a kid. I grew up in such a protective household. It was always, focused on academics. But then my personal interest sort of grew and grew and grew and kind of took over that.
My worrying days are not over because I obviously have listened to them, and they come up with all these schemes again and again and over, and this seems like they don't want to stop.
I suppose it is a bit of an addiction. It's my passion, and even when we're on an adventure, we're always kind of thinking about what might be the next one.
Extraordinary journey.